The sky burned red with fire and smoke. Explosions shook the ground. It was a battlefield between humans and aliens. Both sides were fighting hard, but today, the humans were winning. On the other side, an alien warrior named Varen was fighting. With her squad, she was strong, fast, and deadly. Her tall body, sharp claws, and glowing eyes made her feared by her enemies. But then, something went wrong. A human airstrike hit the ground near her. The explosion was huge. Rocks and metal flew everywhere. Varen tried to run, but a large piece of debris crushed her legs. She screamed in pain. Blood poured out. She was trapped. Her squad looked back, but the commander shouted, "Leave her! She is finished." Without a second thought, her squad abandoned her. They ran to save themselves, leaving Varen bleeding and helpless. Varen tried to move, but her legs were gone. She could feel nothing below her waist. She growled in anger and pain. "Cowards," she thought. "They left me to die." Hours passed. The sounds of war moved away. The sky turned dark. Varen was alone on the battlefield. She was ready to die. She closed her eyes, her breathing slow. But then footsteps. Someone was walking nearby. She opened her eyes slowly. A shadow moved closer. It was a human soldier, a Marine. His armor was dirty, his face tired, but his eyes were sharp. His name was Sergeant Ryan. Ryan saw the alien lying under debris. He pointed his gun, ready to shoot. But then he stopped. He looked closer. The alien was still breathing, but barely. She was not a threat anymore. She was broken, bleeding, and helpless. Ryan should have walked away. This was his enemy. But something inside him stopped him. He looked around. No one was watching. He knelt beside the alien. "You're still alive?" he whispered, knowing she wouldn't understand his words. Varen growled weakly. She tried to lift her claws, but she had no strength. She expected the human to kill her, but he didn't. Ryan studied her wounds. He saw her legs were gone. The bleeding had slowed, but she would die soon without help. "Why am I doing this?" he muttered to himself. "You're the enemy." But then he remembered. He remembered the faces of his own squad. They were dead. Killed in an ambush just yesterday. He was the only one left. He knew what it felt like to be alone, to be left behind. Ryan sighed deeply. "No one deserves to die alone," he said. He grabbed a small medkit from his bag. He started cleaning her wounds. Varen flinched, confused. Why was this human helping her? She couldn't understand. Ryan tied bandages around her bleeding stumps. He poured water on her face to keep her awake. She stared at him with weak, glowing eyes. "Don't die on me, big girl," he whispered. Suddenly, a sound voices in the distance. Enemy patrols were nearby. If they found him with an alien, they would kill them both. Ryan looked around, thinking fast. He couldn't leave her. Not now. He found a broken door nearby. He pulled it close and placed Varen on it like a stretcher. She was heavy, but Ryan was strong. "I must be crazy," he said, lifting the door and dragging it across the ground. Night was cold. The battlefield was dangerous. Ryan moved slowly, watching for enemies. Varen could barely keep her eyes open, but she saw the human pulling her with great effort. Why was he doing this? She didn't know. But for the first time, she felt something strange. She felt respect for a human. Time passed slowly. Ryan was tired, but he didn't stop. He kept moving, pulling her along destroyed tanks and broken walls. Finally, he found an old bunker. It was empty and dark. He pulled Varen inside and blocked the entrance with debris. Safe. For now, Ryan sat down, breathing hard. He looked at the alien warrior. "I don't know if you can understand me," he said, "but I'm not leaving you here." Varen watched him. She couldn't speak his language, but she understood his tone, his eyes, his actions. For the first time in her life, she was confused about humans. Ryan prepared a small fire and gave her some water. She drank slowly, still weak but alive, outside. The night was full of danger. But inside the bunker, two enemies sat together, one broken, one tired, but both still alive. Ren thought, Why did he save me? And Ryan thought, what now? How do I save both of us? Both questions had no answers yet, but one thing was sure, this was not the end. It was just the beginning. The cold wind howled outside the bunker. The night was dark, and the smell of smoke was still in the air. Inside, Sergeant Ryan sat quietly, staring at the alien warrior he had just saved. Ren, the alien, was awake but weak. Her sharp eyes watched the human. She didn't understand his language, but she understood one thing: he didn't kill her. He saved her. Ryan leaned against the wall, thinking hard. His mind was a storm. What the hell am I doing? He whispered to himself. Saving the enemy? I should have left her. But deep inside, Ryan knew the truth. He couldn't leave her behind. Not after what happened to his own squad. They had been surrounded, outnumbered, and no one came to help. He remembered the screams, the gunfire, the silence that followed. He remembered what it felt like to be abandoned. Ryan stood up and checked his gear. His supplies were low. He had a little water, some food, and a half-empty medkit. He knew the enemy patrols would soon sweep the area. Staying here meant death. He looked at Varen. She was injured, her legs gone. She couldn't move on her own. Damn it, Ryan muttered. He had a choice: leave the alien here and escape alone, or take her with him and risk everything. He looked into her eyes. There was no fear in her. Only pride and pain. She was a warrior, even broken. She didn't beg. Ryan sighed. You're coming with me, he said. I'm not leaving you. Varen didn't understand his words, but she saw his actions. He started fixing the makeshift stretcher again, tightening the straps. She realized he was preparing to move. She wanted to ask, why? But she couldn't speak his tongue. She stayed silent, watching him. When the first light of dawn touched the sky, Ryan was ready. He lifted the stretcher and began pulling her out of the bunker. Every step was heavy. Varen was not light, and the terrain was rough, but Ryan pushed forward. As they moved, Varen heard the distant sounds of enemy scouts, her own kind. She growled low, warning Ryan. Yeah, I hear them too, Ryan said. They needed to move faster, but pulling a heavy alien warrior slowed him down. His muscles burned. His breath became heavy. Suddenly, voices close and sharp. Ryan dropped behind a fallen tree, hiding the stretcher with leaves and dirt. He covered Varen and whispered, Stay quiet. Varen wanted to snarl. She hated hiding, but she obeyed. She trusted this human, at least for now. The enemy patrol passed by, just a few meters away. Ryan held his breath, finger on the trigger of his rifle. One wrong move, and they'd both be dead. The patrol moved on. Ryan waited a few minutes, then uncovered Varen. We're still alive, he whispered with a grin. Ren looked at him, confused by his smile. She didn't understand humans. They were supposed to be weak cowards. Yet this one was strong, determined. They kept moving, but Ryan knew he couldn't carry her forever. He needed shelter, a place to hide. Hours later, he found a small cave in the side of a hill. It was narrow but deep. He pulled Varen inside and collapsed beside her. Exhausted, Ryan drank the last of his water and offered some to Varen. She hesitated, then drank. They sat in silence. Two enemies forced together. Ryan looked at her again. Why am I doing this? He asked himself aloud. I should hate you. But he didn't. Not anymore. Varen watched his face. She saw pain in his eyes. Not just from the journey, but from something deeper. She understood that pain. She felt it too. She reached out weakly and touched his hand with her claw. A small gesture, but it meant something. Ryan looked down at her claw in his hand. He chuckled softly. Weird way to make friends. Varen didn't know the word friend, but she understood his tone. It wasn't hate, it wasn't fear. It was respect. Outside, the war raged on. But inside that small cave, something strange was happening. A bond was forming between two warriors, from two different worlds. Neither of them knew what would happen next. But both knew one thing. They were no longer just enemies, and the real danger was still coming. The cave was dark and cold, but it was safe, for now. Sergeant Ryan sat near the entrance, his rifle in his lap, listening to every sound. Beside him, Varen the alien warrior was resting. Her body was weak, her legs gone, but her spirit was still strong. She kept her eyes on the human. She still didn't understand him, but deep inside, she didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt protected. Ryan knew they couldn't stay in the cave forever. His water was finished. Food was low. The enemy was moving across the land, hunting survivors, both human and alien. Suddenly, Varen's ears twitched. She heard something. A low humming sound, growing closer. Ryan heard it too. He picked up his rifle and crawled to the cave entrance. Then, he saw them, drones. Small flying machines scanning the ground with red lights. They belonged to the aliens, Varen's own people. They're searching, Ryan whispered. And if they find us, we're dead. Varen growled softly. She knew those drones well. They never missed anything. Once they marked a target, soldiers would arrive quickly. Ryan had to think fast. He looked at Varen. I can't carry you and outrun drones. But I'm not leaving you. She stared at him, not knowing his words, but she saw the worry in his face. Then Ryan smiled with a wild idea. He grabbed a dirty blanket from his bag and wrapped it around Varen, covering her alien features. You're too bright, he joked. Need to make you less shiny. She blinked, confused, but let him do it. Then Ryan covered the entrance of the cave with branches and leaves. It looked like part of the hill now. He sat close to Varen, finger on the trigger, eyes sharp. Drone passed over the cave, its red light scanning the ground. It paused, hovering. Ryan held his breath. His heart thumped hard. One wrong move, one sound, and it would be over. Varen closed her eyes, forcing herself to stay still, even though her instincts screamed to fight. The drone hovered a bit longer, then flew away. Ryan exhaled slowly. That was too close, he whispered. But the danger wasn't over. In the distance, they heard shouting, soldiers. The drone had seen something, and now the patrol was heading their way. Ryan stood up. We have to move, now. He lifted Varen onto the stretcher again. She growled softly, frustrated at her weakness, but she understood. They couldn't stay. Ryan pulled her out of the cave, moving fast but careful. Behind them, the sounds of boots on dirt grew louder. The patrol was close. Very close. Ryan pushed his body harder, dragging Varen over rocks and fallen trees. His muscles screamed in pain, but he didn't stop. Suddenly, gunfire. Bullets hit the trees around them. The enemy patrol had found them. Ryan dove behind a large rock, pulling Varen with him. Varen tried to sit up, but she was too weak. She watched as the human aimed his rifle and fired back. His shots were precise, fast. He moved like a true warrior. She had never seen a human fight like this before. Not with such fury, not with such courage. Ryan took down one soldier, then another, but more kept coming. We can't stay here, he shouted to himself. He looked around and saw a narrow path downhill, risky, but their only chance. He grabbed the stretcher again and ran toward the path. Bullets flying past his head. Varen felt every bump and jolt, but she stayed silent. She couldn't fight, but she could trust him. The path was steep. Ryan slipped and stumbled, but he kept going. Behind them, the enemy chased. shouting in their alien language. Then Ryan saw it, a river at the bottom of the hill. The current was strong. Ryan smiled. Time for a swim. He ran straight into the water, pulling the stretcher with Varane still tied to it. The cold water hit them both, but the current carried them away fast. The enemy reached the riverbank, but it was too late. The human and the alien warrior were gone, carried downstream. Ryan held onto the stretcher, gasping for air, while Varane lay still, the water washing over her. Finally, the river pushed them onto a muddy shore far away from the patrol. Ryan collapsed, breathing hard. Varane looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with a new feeling, respect and curiosity. This human had fought for her, bled for her, and now risked everything to keep her alive. Why? That question echoed in her mind. Ryan coughed and laughed weakly. We made it. I think the chase was over for now. But both knew this was just the beginning, because somewhere deep in the war zone, more enemies waited, and Varane was starting to wonder, was this human really her enemy? The river had carried them far from the enemy patrol. But now Ryan and Varane lay on the muddy shore, cold, tired, and soaked to the bone. The sky was turning gray. Morning was coming, but it brought no peace. The land was quiet, but danger still lived in every shadow. Ryan sat up slowly, his body aching. He looked at Varane. She was awake, but barely. Her eyes glowed faintly. She had lost too much blood. She was weak, and her legs still gone. You're still breathing, Ryan muttered. Good. He stood up, his legs shaky. He looked around. In the distance he saw trees, a forest. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. I need to get you out of the open, Ryan said. He pulled Varane onto the stretcher again. His body protested, every muscle screaming, but he kept moving. One step, then another, into the forest. Hours passed. Birds flew overhead. The smell of damp earth filled the air. Ryan finally found a small hollow under a giant tree, a natural shelter. He placed Varane down gently. She stared at him, her breathing shallow. Ryan knelt beside her. He opened his medkit, checking her wounds. The bandages were wet and dirty. I have to fix this, or you'll die, he said. Varane watched his face. She still didn't understand his words, but she saw his worry, his hands working carefully to clean her wounds again. She felt his touch, gentle but firm. When Ryan finished, he gave her a sip of water from a canteen he found floating in the river. You're a fighter, he whispered. You've held on this long. Varane's eyes softened. She wanted to speak, but their languages were different. Still, she understood his actions. Hours passed. Ryan sat nearby, eating a small piece of dry bread. Then, he did something strange. He offered some to Varane. She sniffed it, confused. Food? From a human? She took a small bite. It tasted dry and bland, but her body needed it. Ryan smiled. See? Not poison. Varane gave a low growl, but not in anger, more like amusement. For the first time, she saw something strange in this human. Kindness. That night, they sat in silence. The sounds of the forest filled the air. Ryan looked up at the sky, the stars shining through the branches. I had a squad, he said softly. Good men, good friends. They're gone now. Left me alone. Varane watched him. She couldn't understand the words, but she saw his eyes, full of sadness. Maybe that's why I saved you, Ryan continued. I know what it feels like ... to be left behind. Varane felt a tightness in her chest. She remembered the moment her own squad left her to die. She had called for them, but they ran. They didn't even look back. Both of them, the human and the alien, had been abandoned. Ryan leaned back against the tree. I don't even know your name, he said. He pointed at himself. Ryan. Then he pointed at her. You? Varane understood. She opened her mouth weakly and spoke her name for the first time to him. Varane. Ryan smiled. Varane. That single quote's different, but it fits. She didn't know the word fits, but his smile made her feel less alone. Slowly, the bond between them grew. No words were needed. Just looks, small gestures, and the simple fact that they were still alive. Together. Ryan gathered wood and started a small fire. Varen felt the warmth and closed her eyes, resting better than before. As Ryan watched the flames, he made a silent promise to himself. I'll get you out of this. I don't know how yet. But I will. Varen, half asleep, heard his voice. She didn't understand, but she felt the meaning in his tone. She was no longer just a burden. She was something more. Outside, the war still raged. But here, under a giant tree, a human and an alien, once enemies, sat together like warriors of the same side. They had no plan, no clear path forward, but they had each other. And sometimes that was enough to survive. The fire crackled softly under the great tree. Ryan sat close, watching the flames dance. His body ached from exhaustion, but his mind was awake, thinking. Varen slept beside the fire, her breathing slow but steady. Her face looked calmer now, but her legs. Still gone. The bandages Ryan made were holding, but they wouldn't last forever. Ryan stared at her. An alien, someone he was trained to kill, now depending on him to live. Crazy, Ryan whispered to himself. What the hell am I doing? But deep inside, he knew why. Suddenly, Varen stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, catching the soft glow of the fire. She looked at Ryan, sitting quietly with his back against the tree. She watched him for a while. Then, with her weak voice, she whispered something in her language. Ryan didn't understand, but he heard the tone, a question. Ryan chuckled softly. You want to know why I'm helping you, huh? He looked up at the sky through the leaves. The stars were cold and distant, like silent watchers. I'll tell you, Ryan said, knowing she wouldn't understand, but needing to say it anyway. I had a squad, 7 good Marines. We were brothers and sisters. We trained together, fought together. Varen watched his face. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried weight, old pain. We got a mission. Deep behind enemy lines, supposed to be simple. But it was a trap, Ryan continued. We were surrounded by your people. My friends fought hard, but one by one, they died. I saw them fall. He clenched his fists. His jaw tightened. In the end, I was the last one standing. Bleeding, broken. And when I called for help, double quotes, his voice grew colder. No one came. Command said they couldn't risk more men. So they left me to die. Varen's eyes softened. She understood. That feeling. She had lived it herself when her own squad left her under the rubble. Ryan laughed bitterly. But I didn't die. I crawled out. I survived, alone. He looked directly at Varen. So when I saw you, lying there with no legs, left by your own squad, I saw myself. Varen blinked slowly, understanding not the words but the pain behind them. I couldn't leave you, Ryan whispered. Because if I did, I'd be just like them. Silence fell between them. The fire popped and hissed, the night wind whispering through the trees. Then Varen did something unexpected. She reached out with her clawed hand and touched Ryan's arm. It was not a grip, not a threat, just a connection. Ryan looked down at her hand, then at her glowing eyes. For the first time, he didn't see an enemy. He saw a warrior, just like him. Thank you, she said softly in her own language. Ryan didn't understand the word, but he smiled. I'll pretend I know what that means. Morning came. The sky turned pale blue, but Ryan knew daylight brought more risk. He packed his things, what little he had, and looked at Varen. We have to move, she nodded weakly. She couldn't walk, couldn't fight, but her mind was sharp. Ryan dragged the stretcher once again, deeper into the forest. Hours passed. Birds scattered. The forest grew dense and dark. Then Ryan stopped. Before them stood a narrow metal door, half buried in the ground, covered by vines. A wren looked confused. What was this place? Ryan smiled. You're lucky I'm not just muscle, he said. I was trained for survival. I know the hidden places in enemy land. He pushed the vines away and entered a code on a rusty keypad. The door clicked open. It was an old human escape tunnel, built long ago and forgotten by most. Inside, it was dark but dry, with old supplies still stored in crates. We'll be safe here for a while, Ryan said. Wren's eyes widened slightly. She was impressed. This human was more than a soldier. He was a survivor. A planner. Ryan carried her inside, placing her on an old cot. He looked at her and smiled. You rest now, Varen. I'll figure out our next move. Varen, tired but alive, stared at him. This human, this enemy, had secrets, pain, and strength. And now she wasn't just a saved warrior. She was a part of his fight to survive. Deep inside, she made herself a promise. If she ever walked again, she would stand beside this human, not against him. Outside, the war still burned the world. But deep underground, a human and an alien warrior shared something stronger than war. Respect. And maybe something close to friendship. Days passed inside the hidden tunnel. The air was cold, but it was safe. Ryan had found old supplies, water, dried food, some tools, even a weak power generator that lit the place with dim lights. Wren's wounds were healing slowly. She still couldn't move without help, but her mind was sharper, her eyes stronger. She watched Ryan work, always busy fixing things, always thinking. She wondered, what kind of human was this? A warrior, a protector, and yet he had the heart of a brother. Ryan made a habit of talking to her, even though she didn't understand most of his words. Food's not great. He chuckled one day, handing her a piece of dry ration, but it's better than starving. Varen accepted it silently. She had stopped seeing him as an enemy. Now she saw him as something else, maybe a comrade. But peace didn't last. One night, while Ryan was checking the tunnel door, he froze. His ear caught a sound, faint but real. Footsteps, heavy ones. And not just one set, many. He grabbed his rifle and ran back to Varen. We've got trouble, he said. They found us. Varen sat up slightly, her face grim. She couldn't fight. She couldn't run. She was a burden, again. Ryan read her expression. Don't give me that look, he said. I'm not leaving you. Boom! The sound of an explosion echoed through the tunnel entrance. Dust fell from the ceiling. The enemy was blasting their way in. Ryan stood between Varen and the door, rifle ready. He set traps, tripwires, explosives, everything he had left. This is it, Ryan whispered to himself. One last stand. Varen watched, frustration burning inside her. She was a warrior, but now useless. Then she saw Ryan place a grenade in his vest. She realized his plan. He was ready to die here. To die fighting for her. She shook her head and growled in her language. Fool. Ryan looked back. What? Don't like the plan? Me neither. The first enemy soldier stepped into the tunnel. Boom! A trap exploded, sending fire and smoke, but more followed. Gunfire echoed. Ryan fired, dropping enemy after enemy, his aim sharp, his rage burning. Varen couldn't watch helplessly. She grabbed a broken metal pipe beside her, pulled herself up with her arms, dragging her body forward. Ryan was reloading when he saw her crawling closer. What are you doing? He shouted. Varen growled and pointed at a grenade near him. She then pointed at herself, her meaning clear. Let me fight. Let me help. Ryan stared. Then slowly he understood. Even without legs, she was still a warrior. He handed her the grenade. She held it tightly, eyes glowing. The enemy pushed deeper. Ryan fired, but they were too many. Then Varen roared. a loud, deep sound that shook the tunnel. The enemies paused. Hearing the voice of a dying but defiant warrior, she pulled the pin of the grenade and with her last strength, threw it down the tunnel with perfect aim. The explosion rocked the ground, sending smoke and screams echoing through the passage. Ryan grabbed Varane, pulling her back. "You're insane," he said. "But thanks." More footsteps approached. It wasn't over. Ryan's heart raced. He was out of traps, almost out of bullets. Then, a loud blast came from outside. Not from Ryan. Then, another dot, and voices, human voices. Ryan's radio crackled. A weak signal came through. ... Survivor ... This is Echo Team. We're coming in. Ryan's eyes lit up. Rescue. After all this time, he shouted back into the radio. "Here. We're here." The battle above ground had changed. Human forces had arrived, pushing the enemy back. Minutes later, human soldiers stormed into the tunnel. Their flashlights caught Ryan, bloody and tired, standing over Varane. The soldiers aimed at her immediately. "Stand down!" Ryan shouted, "She's with me." Confused but trusting Ryan, the soldiers lowered their guns. The leader stepped forward. "What the hell, Sarge, you rescued an alien?" Ryan smiled weakly. "She's not the enemy anymore." The soldiers helped lift Varane onto a proper stretcher. She looked at Ryan, her eyes tired but proud. They had survived the last stand. Together. As the soldiers carried them out of the tunnel, Ryan whispered to her, "We made it, Varane. Told you I wouldn't leave you." Varane couldn't speak his words, but she understood, and in her mind, she made a vow: one day she would fight beside this human, as his equal, as his sister in battle. Outside, the sky was still burning, but somewhere beyond the smoke, a strange new alliance had been born. The sky was painted with smoke and fire, but Ryan didn't care anymore. The war zone was far behind them now. He sat quietly inside the evacuation ship, the hum of the engine steady. Beside him on a special bed lay Varane, the alien warrior, who should have died, yet still breathed. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft lights. She was alive, saved, but changed. She looked down where her legs used to be, now replaced with smooth mechanical stumps. Human technology. Ryan saw her wake and smiled. "Hey, tough girl. Welcome back." Varane tilted her head. She had no words in his language, but she understood his voice, warm, familiar. Weeks had passed since the last stand in the tunnel. The humans had brought them both to a secure base, far from the front lines. Doctors had patched Varane up, keeping her alive. Engineers had even started designing mechanical legs for her, but it wasn't just her body that was being rebuilt. It was her mind. She had seen too much. A human had saved her life, protected her, fought for her. Not for duty, not for reward, but for something deeper. Respect. The door to the room opened. A human officer walked in, his face serious. "Sergeant Ryan," he said, "Command wants to see you." Ryan stood up, giving Varane a nod. "I'll be back. Don't run off without me." Varane gave a soft, low sound, almost like a chuckle. At Command HQ, Ryan stood before generals and advisors. "You saved an enemy," one of them said. "Why?" Ryan stood straight. "She was abandoned, same as I was. And she didn't give up. She deserves better than death in the dirt." Another general leaned forward. "You think she's trustworthy?" Ryan nodded. "She is a warrior. She fought beside me when she couldn't even stand. That's more than some men I've known." The room went quiet. Then the lead general said, "We'll see. She be watched, but for now, you've earned her life." Ryan left the room, satisfied. Back in the med bay, Varane was waiting. When Ryan entered, she looked at him with curiosity. "What did they say?" she asked in her own language, even though he couldn't understand. Ryan smiled. "They said we'll see, but you're safe for now." Then came a surprise. A team of human engineers rolled in a set of mechanical legs, sleek, strong, and shaped to her form. Via Wren stared at them, her claws curling slightly. She wasn't sure if she wanted them. Ryan sat next to her. They're yours. You don't have to take them. But if you want to walk again, fight again, these will help. Varen looked at him. She remembered her vow. She couldn't stay on a bed forever. She was a warrior. She would rise again. She nodded slowly. The engineers smiled and got to work. Days passed. Varen learned to stand on the new legs. She fell, she struggled, but she never gave up. And Ryan was there every step. He trained her, helped her balance. Even though her kind moved differently. Little by little, she walked. Then she ran. One morning, Varen stood tall in the training yard, mechanical legs humming softly. She looked at Ryan. She beat her chest once, the warrior's salute. Ryan grinned and returned the salute. You're back, he said. Tougher than before. Varen pointed to herself and then to him. Then she made the crossing of arms, the sign of unity. Ryan chuckled. Yeah, we're a team now. And just like that, an alien warrior and a human marine, born enemies, now stood side by side. War still raged beyond the horizon. But something had changed. Va Wren was no longer just a survivor. She was reborn, not as an enemy, but as a future ally. A warrior reborn, because one human refused to leave her behind. And together, they were ready to face whatever came next.